I'm Jim Knight, co-founder of the Instructional Coaching Group, and you're listening to Coaching Conversations, where I talk with coaching experts from around the world so that all of us can learn better ways to make an unmistakably positive impact on the people around us. Christian, it is the end of the day for me here. I'm in Nebraska, um, working on a variety of things. I went for a walk and wore myself out, but I am so energized by the chance I get to talk with you. One of my top 5 people in the world.
No, no.
So it's wonderful to see you, and I've missed our conversations, and I'm so excited today. I forced my topic onto you for the first 10 minutes. You didn't want to do it. You thought it was too self-centered, but I said, no, we have to talk about the trip down Route 66 from Chicago to Santa Monica. If I had my way, that's all we would talk about. But at the same time, your new book on reflective practice is awesome, and I can't wait to talk about it. So we're gonna do this is a 2-for-1 podcast. We're gonna do 2 things at one time. So I'm super excited to have the chance to talk. And you're in Sydney, Australia today, a man of the world. Today you're in Sydney. Is that correct?
That's right, Jim. I'm in Sydney, Australia at GCI's headquarters. This is where Growth Coaching International is. And as you know, Jim, we've been celebrating the merger between ICG and GCI. And there's a lot of excitement in the office about that. So it's been wonderful for me to come drop in here. And I'm actually running a couple sessions on reflective practice with groups of leaders here in Sydney next week.
Well, I'm sure it'll be great. I wish I could be there. And I'm thrilled that I get to spend more time working with the folks from Growth Coaching, and that we get to offer all these things. Plus, if I get my way, we'll spend more time with you too, and you'll be a big part of us moving forward. So I'm excited. I'm excited to do that. I'm sorry England didn't win the Euro Cup when we were together, but still, they won when we were together. I think it's just that when I came back to America that the good luck was gone. So
We need you in England next time this happens. And, you know, as many of my English friends would say, it is coming home. It's just a matter of when football comes home.
someday, well, the World Cup's in North America next time, so
Okay,
I'll
okay.
be. It's in Kansas City, so it'll just be down the road. I hope to catch a game. That'd be great. Okay, so first off, I'm watching the clock. Selfishly, I'd like this to be about 2 hours about your trip, but I'll try to keep it to 10 minutes. Where did you, in one of your videos, you said you've been thinking about this for 30 years.
Hmm.
Where did you get the idea to ride a Harley Davidson from Chicago to Santa Monica, the whole route of Route 66?
Yeah. Well, I remembered very clearly. I must have been around 12 years old, and I was watching a TV series called CHIPS, which is short for California Highway Patrol. And one of the actors was like my role model, Eric Estrada. And they ride, they ride Harley Davidson motorcycles, and the TV series is all about their escapades as California Highway Patrolmen. And they're riding these Harley Davidsons. And I thought, you know, and I was growing up, it was a war zone, you know, there were difficult times there, and just this idea of one day I'm going to be on a motorcycle, and so I promised myself one day I'm going to ride a Harley Davidson in California. Now the Route 66 bit came a little bit later when I was a bit older and I learned about motorcycles, because for motorcyclists, you know, that Route 66 journey is one of the the things that motorcyclists want to do once in their lifetime kind of things. So it's a combination of those two things. And as it turned out, it was a Harley Davidson. I picked it up in Chicago. It's a company called Eagle Rider. I picked up the motorcycle in Chicago, and I got to ride that same motorcycle in California. And so for me, this idea of it being a lifetime dream was important. And that's probably because, you know, I did actually, one of the places I thought I might move to from Lebanon was the United States. But as things played out, it was the United Kingdom that I went to. So I'm grateful that I still got to do this trip of a lifetime. And yeah, it was when I was in the United Kingdom that I learned to become a coach. I became interested in coaching. And as I was coaching other people, Jim, I did notice that one of the things that came up a lot is, uh, people saying, this is something I've always wanted to do. That's a topic they bring to coaching a lot. And as I was supporting so many other people to do those things they've always wanted to do, I thought, I've always wanted to do this thing. And in fact, I received some coaching around that. That was one of the first conversations. And I've been very grateful to have conversations with you about it, Jim, and with John Campbell as well, and other, really wonderful mentors and friends that I have. And already kind of a little insight is popping into my head. This will link to what we're going to talk about in relation to reflective practice later. But I think having a reflective practice model in your mind helps you to capture learning all the
Mm,
time. So the little learning point that's popped into my head is the value of telling people about your dreams.
mm. That's very interesting. So I want to make sure I've got this right. You were in literally war-torn Beirut in
Yeah.
Lebanon. War was going on, and your little sanctuary was watching Eric Estrada on Chips. And you said, someday I'm going to be like him. I'm going to ride a Harley Davidson across the United States. And that's where the genesis of all this came from.
It's so embarrassing, Jim, because you'll
I think
see
it's great. It's beautiful.
on some of the videos of my Route 66 adventure, you'll be able to see that I'm wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses.
Oh, yeah.
That's because that's what Eric Estrada wore.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Gosh. Okay, so why motorcycles? What's the fascination with motorcycles? And I want to talk about a couple of the big insights, but I'm just interested in your coach on a motorcycle. Why on a motorcycle? Why not coach,
Mm,
in
that,
a boat? I don't know. Why
yeah,
a motorcycle?
coach and a motorboat. Well, as a person that's linked to GCI, actually, my dear colleague Claudia Owad, her daughter Jasmine, a wonderful young lady, she used the phrase one time. She said, "I'm a land person." So that's one thing. I'm not a motorboat person. I'm more of a land person. I love being on solid ground. But the motorcycle thing, well, one is the thing that most motorcyclists and also cyclists will tell you, which is wanting to be out there experiencing what's going on around us. So I think there's something very different between riding Route 66 on a motorcycle because I did it. I can tell you, I could smell things, beautiful things, and not so nice things. I could tell when I was in a little dip and it was colder, the cold air, you can kind of feel it. You can hear the noise of what's going on around you. So I love being fully immersed in where I am. So that's the motorcycle bit. But there's a thing linked back to the war-torn Beirut thing. So as I was growing up there, I was thinking, what do I need to learn? And by the way, love of learning is a strength of mine. I only found out much later, but that was my question: is what do I need to learn so that I can make a life for myself outside this place that I was in? And there's nothing wrong with Beirut, by the way. It's a beautiful city in a beautiful country, but it was during times of war. So I was thinking, what do I need to learn to be able to get out? And uh, one of the things was I'd heard that there were motorcycle couriers in Europe. And these were people who would ride motorcycles around to avoid traffic and get bits, it's a kind of a, like an Uber for motorcycles. Of course, Uber didn't exist back then. So there was this idea also is that if I could learn to ride a motorcycle, I could be a motorcycle courier in Europe. And that's why I learned to ride a motorcycle when I was 16 years old. And interestingly, my mom, who's sadly passed away recently, um, it's the one thing she said. She said, "You can do whatever you like. The only thing I don't want you to do is ride a motorcycle." But I did anyway. I'm kind of rebellious. And when I was 16, I learned to ride a motorcycle, and I'd always had in my mind that I'd be able to use that skill elsewhere. But as I was learning the skill, I learned that I enjoy it.
Mm,
So it was one of those wonderful things where I'm getting enjoyment out of it, but I thought it could be a useful skill as well.
mm. Well, I know how much you love Lebanon. We've talked about visiting there sometime. I'd love to go with you at a time that seems like a good time because you've spoken so lovingly about your home. So I'd love to go back. And I want to ask you about sort of three ideas from your series of videos. If people haven't seen the YouTube series, you've got about 18 different positive psychology, big concepts, big ideas. I want to go there in a minute, but first, since you mentioned your VIA Strength Finder puts you as learning is your number one strength, which it is for me, but unlike you, humility is not number two. Humility is like 797 for me or
I
something.
don't
It's
believe it. I do not believe
very
that
low
either.
on the list. But learning is it's so what would you say as you look back, what comes to mind is two or three things you learned about the trip? And then after that, I'll ask this question again, but I'd love to hear about sort of like one or two highlights, and was there maybe a low light, a kind of a dark time in the whole journey? And let me just say one more thing. It was my favorite thing to watch on the internet was to watch these Instagram updates. I love the idea of a journey. I used to teach a course called Travel Themes in Literature and Film. I loved a journey. I love watching it reveal itself every day. So it was such a pleasure. But when you're on that journey, what are
Mm,
a couple of things you learned?
yeah. Well, one thing I learned a lot about myself, and in fact, those 18 insights, um, uh, I learned about them on the road, as it were. And of course, this idea of coaching as a journey, it's been something that I've thought a lot about. So I was kind of curious about that as well. I was curious about this distinction between um, getting to the destination and enjoying the journey. And it's something I really wanted to learn about. And I guess I learned that it's really not one or the other because I did have a limited amount of time to do this whole journey. So I did have to keep an eye on how far away am I from the destination. But it was, and these are things that are easier to say. That's why I think riding it and experiencing it was great. But it's really the balancing out of I didn't want to every morning be saying to myself, how many more miles have I got before I get to Santa Monica? And with these counting things we have now of 1,000 steps or whatever, I think there's something similar. So people listening to this might also be able to relate to that, to think, the 1,000 steps or however many steps it is, wouldn't it be nice if those steps were all enjoyable as well? Enjoyable
Mm,
steps. And I think the reason many of us want to do these things isn't to hit a target. So we're not doing the 1,000 steps because it feels good to get to 1,000, although it does feel good to get to 1,000. But it's like getting to Santa Monica was wonderful. But if that had been my objective every day, I can imagine a scenario where I would have just been counting down the miles to say, okay, I'm 600 miles closer now or whatever. And so I was trying to get that balance right. So I learned that about um, myself is that I do need a destination to get to. If you had said, Christian, you've got 6 months, just spend it on Route 66, I don't think I would have gotten as much enjoyment. So something you talk about, Jim, this idea of freedom within form, that idea as well was in my mind about it was good to know I only had 21 days. I had allocated 21 days for this trip. I had to do it within that window. But within that, there was so much flexibility. I could have spent more time in different places. I could have spent less time. And there was even a moment where I thought, I don't even need to stay on Route 66. This isn't a Guinness World Book attempt where somebody's going to say, well, you weren't on Route 66 for this 100 miles or whatever. So there was also that freedom to say, well, this is my trip. This is my journey. And of course, the analogies with life and with coaching are huge. And so there was a lot of learning about that for me as well. So that was probably one of my biggest uh, broad learning moments. And the other was a misconception that I had, because a lot of learning, I guess, is unlearning things we believe. And I've always thought, don't I always told myself, don't look forward things too much. Don't be too positive about what an experience might be like because you'd be disappointed.
Mm.
And so there was that concern because, like we've talked about, this has been 30 years daydreaming about this, and I had a little talk to myself saying, Christian, you need to be, it's not going to be as good as you're thinking. It can't be as good as that. I was trying to temper my expectations to say, you know, I'd been reading things about Route 66 is in decline. It's not what it used to be. So there was a lot of that. But what I learned is I had very high expectations and it exceeded them. And
Mm.
so um, I'm just thinking about the joy of looking forward to something. Why temper that? Even if the expect, even if the experience isn't as good as you had hoped, I'm just thinking now, look forward to it because you get joy from looking forward to it. And then, I mean, maybe the football soccer analogy is helpful here. If you're supporting a team, it's okay to hope that they win before the game. And in other words, I shouldn't be cautious and dreading the game before it. Let me look forward to it. And if they do win, it's even better. And if they don't win, that's okay because it doesn't take away from the moments of excited anticipation I had beforehand.
They're a little related, aren't they? Like the idea that if I'm going to walk 10,000 steps, that I should count every step as meaningful and not worry about only counting off the steps and getting through them, but actually living in them. And then, in a way, you're saying don't miss out on the chance to anticipate, to enjoy the anticipation as much as the event. If
Yeah.
you downplay the anticipation, you're gonna miss out to some extent. That's very, very, very cool. Tell me about one or two highlights and one low light. In a story, there's always like Iron Man looks
Yeah.
like he's going to win. Oh no, he's being destroyed, but he comes back and then he ultimately wins in some way.
Yeah.
Although he did die at the end. But nonetheless, in a story, there are these ups and downs. So, what was an up? What was a down?
Yeah. You're right. This could be hours long, so I have to be careful because one of the books that's popped into my mind is called The Seven Basic Plots. It's an excellent book. And it says that as human beings, there's seven main stories we like, and we've told thousands of times. And one of them is the hero's journey, this idea of the ups and downs. So it's interesting and kind of weird, Jim, if I'm honest, because on the night before I was going to collect the motorcycle, I went to Chicago 2 or 3 days before picking up the motorcycle. That night, there was thunder all night. It was really strange. Thunder, lightning, and heavy rain. This is the night before. And I was just thinking, what have I committed to here? So one of the lowlights was that kind of dread. I was thinking, like I said, I was thinking, well, it's not going to be as good as I thought. And then I realized because of my optimism and my kind of naivete, I thought, I've never ridden 19 days before. I don't really know what this entails. I haven't really gone through and planned what to do in various scenarios. So it's ironic, it is strange, but that self-doubt pop, and I teach about this stuff and I study this stuff, this what I call the inner game. And to experience it myself of moments of self-doubt, it's a long time to be away from my emails. What will people think? There was that as well, Jim. I'm supposed to
Mm.
be an academic, I work in a university setting. What are people going to think 19 days there's lots of difficult things going on in the world at the same time. Will people judge that I'm doing this thing? So that night before the journey, lots of those darker thoughts and doubts. And, at its most extreme, I was thinking, should I just cancel the whole thing? And why am I doing this? Why don't I just take it for a week? Um, and then the learning, of course, is that once I'm in the saddle, and it is a saddle on a motorcycle, once I'm in the saddle, that saying, get back on the horse kind of idea. But that once I was on the saddle, all that positivity came back. And I was thinking, no, no, why was I doubting this? This is what I want to do. I've branded myself coach on a motorcycle. And one of the little mantras I've had professionally, because everything we're talking about happens professionally as well, just about before I'm about to give a keynote, I'm thinking, why did I agree to do this? And who am I to do this? So all of that, the reminder that once we're there. So my little mantra is, uh, this is what you do. So when I go into a coaching conversation, when I give a keynote, when I write a book, anytime I encounter those doubts, I say to myself, wait a minute, Christian, this is what you do. And because I'd branded myself coach on a motorcycle, when I was having those doubts, I thought, no, no, you are coach on a motorcycle. This is what you do. And once I was on the saddle, all of those doubts dissipated. So that's, probably exaggerating to say it's some kind of darker thing, but it was a real thing that kind of aligns with the journey. So that was balanced out by moments of pure joy and delight, realizing that I'm on the motorcycle and I'm doing it. So those first few days riding through Illinois, I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is actually happening and it's amazing. And the weather, it's a bit like in the movies, but there was a little bit of rain as I was leaving Chicago, but then it was beautiful sunshine for 18 of the 19 days I was riding, beautiful sunshine. And so as I'm riding along, real moments of exhilaration just by thinking I'm actually doing this thing. And I had my AirPods in, I was listening to music, riding on Route 66 with playlists that I'd created for this journey. So I had a playlist called Coach on a Motorcycle. That was part of my anticipation for this. What are the songs I'll be listening to? And then that's comparing me imagining I'm going to be listening to this song on Route 66. So I'm listening to it on Route 66. Those were beautiful moments. So I'll tell you one mother highlight, and one wasn't really a low light now that I take the broader perspective, but in those moments, they were kind of little down moments. So highlights was getting to Seligman, Arizona. And Seligman is kind of iconic Route 66 place. And when I got to Seligman, it's just such a lively, fun place. It's a joking place. There's a little cafe there there's little signs saying, sorry, we're open, right? So it's just it was comedy throughout. The person there said, would you like some straw? Or would you like a straw with your Coke? And gave me an actual bale of straw. And it was just kind of silliness personified. But Seligman really captured, for me, Seligman, Arizona captured the spirit of Route 66. And then there were bookshops along the way. I love bookshops and I like to support independent bookshops. And I found a few along the way. I've recorded some of them in my videos, but one of them had only opened a month ago. And I loved that and the Spirit of America Museum on Route 66, that's opened recently as well. So in the midst of the narrative of its kind of disappearing, or we're losing Route 66. I saw little green shoots of the continued creativity of people. And, the other thing, Jim, is people were amazing, supportive, friendly throughout the whole journey, right from Chicago until I got to Santa Monica, people who went out of their way to be welcoming, friendly, um, stepping up when needed. So another low light is Tulsa. Well, Tulsa, I loved it, by the way. Tulsa, Oklahoma, I loved. But the low light was wake up from the hotel. Here's a little example of my naivete, right? And being over optimistic. Wake up in Tulsa. My plan is to get to Oklahoma City. I've already booked my hotel in Oklahoma City that morning. I go down, get on the motorcycle. The front tire is a little bit flat. And I'm thinking, oh, it should be okay. But it wasn't. It was pretty clear it wasn't going to be okay. I rode for about 10 minutes and it went completely flat. It's a Sunday, happened to be a Sunday. Everything's closed. The Harley dealers are closed. The tire repair places are closed. So I was in the middle of somewhere just on the outskirts of Tulsa. I pulled into a petrol station. My phone doesn't work in the US. And so I go into this little the shop in a gas station. And turns out the guy there initially wasn't that friendly because he's dealing with a huge queue of people. Then I just said, look, I'm stuck here. He let me use his phone.
Hmm.
He let me go into his office. He said, just sit in the office while you're waiting. Really went out of his way. And he's a great guy. Turns out he'd been to University of Oklahoma, studied business management. We had a great conversation. So the tow guy was amazing. We had some wonderful conversations. So, oh, and then on in Arizona, when I was riding across Arizona, there were really strong winds and truck drivers, Jim, that I've never met before and I'll never meet, unfortunately. They provided a windshield for me. They kind of
Hmm.
blocked the wind. So we're on Route 66. I'm on the inside lane riding at about 70 miles an hour. The trucks are on my left, driving the same speed. They saw me tucked in beneath in there, and they were driving. So we were driving literally for about 50 minutes. I'm driving here, protected by the wind of this truck, who's managing his speed so that I'm protected from the wind.
Wow.
So there were so many of those wonderful moments. And, diners, the restaurants, the little bars, people are just so friendly. And at a time when, you put on the social media, the news, all of this, it's highlighting human beings at their worst. There's a lot of news about when human beings are terrible to one another. So I really needed that little boost of actually when you speak to people one on one, there, you can make connections, you can link with them. So it gave me that as well.
Mhm. That's wonderful. Yes, if you give people a chance, they can prove to you that there's still
Mm.
decency and kindness in the world. That's a
There is.
wonderful thing. Um, uh, and there were so many other wonderful things. People should watch the videos on the YouTube channel. You can see the garden made up of different colored bottles that you
Oh
went
yeah,
to, the barbed wire museum, and
yeah,
I don't mean to give all the highlights, but quite a few really amazing things. So it was pretty cool, all the different places you went to. But along the way, what you did is you talked about these different big ideas from positive psychology. It's interesting that Seligman was your favorite town, given the primacy of Martin Seligman in positive psychology. But
yeah,
you talked about different things like Zimbardo's concept of time and hope theory and gratitude, optimism. What
yeah.
are like one or two things that as you look back, you say, I think I really did experience those things, or I spent a lot of time. I mean, you must have had such, I mean, such a gift to be able to spend 8 or however long you're on the motorcycle hours in thought every day. So I'm wondering, of all the things you discussed, the different 18 things, what are one or two that you think really are worth repeating or were on your mind as you took your trip?
Yeah. Well, the time perspective thing, Zimbardo's time perspective, um, that I'd been thinking about even before I went on the journey. And I think what's interesting, this is another insight, is about the importance of us being intentional.
Hmm.
And this will come back when we talk about the reflective practice model as well. but I was intentional about trying to make them, because remember, I was feeling a little bit guilty about doing this whole trip, and I was thinking it's a little bit self-indulgent. Well, it's quite self-indulgent. Um, so I was thinking, if I'm going to do it, I really want to make the most of it. So time perspective is for us just to realize, where do we spend most of our um, mental energy? Are we focus a lot on the future? Is that what we're always thinking about? And before I trained to become a coach, Jim, I was always in the future. That's where my mind liked to be.
Mm.
Uh, there's a lot of upside to that because I'm always planning, I'm goal oriented, I'm thinking I want to do these things in the future. The downside, though, is I wasn't as present in the moment. So I'm good at imagining in the future. I kind of like to be in there. But then another time perspective is the ability to be in the present moment, right? So I was really keen to make sure that on this journey, this tendency to want to think about the future didn't get in the way of me wanting to enjoying the moment. And then, of course, there's past perspective. And according to Zimbardo, there's two past perspectives, according to Zimbardo. One is past positive, one is past negative. And past positive is the tendency to think positively about the past, to reminisce and to get pleasure from thinking about the past. But again, this has its downside because if I'm constantly thinking, oh, back then when Eric Estrada was on his motorcycle, the weather was always amazing in California. It still is. But, it's just, I guess, just being intentional about the benefits and the drawbacks of the different perspectives. So past negative has some advantages, but if we're rooted in that all the time, if I'm thinking, oh, I grew up in a war-torn whatever, and it limited my option. If I stay there, it's not helpful, but we can take a lot from past negative in the sense of just remembering what were the things in the past, negative things, how did I overcome them, what did I learn from them. So I think one big learning was going in intentionally really helped me on this journey because when I was riding, I was trying to appreciate where I was doing some thinking. And at the end of the day, every day, that's when I would do my recordings because the recording is a way of capturing my experiences. And I would make sure that I'm thinking about the future the following morning. So in the evenings, I wouldn't think about what am I doing tomorrow. In the evenings, it would be reminiscing about what was good on that day. What did I enjoy? What am I going to capture? How am I going to edit the video, etc. And then in the morning, which is probably for me the right time to be doing this because I'm at my best in the mornings. I'm more energetic. Like now is a good time for me. It's 8:50 a.m. here. That's when I was doing my thinking about. So I'd go to a little coffee shop, local coffee shop if I could find one. There's a beautiful one in Joplin called the Bearded Lady, for example. So I would go into there. I'd order my drink, and that's when I'd look forward and I'd say, okay, where am I in relation to where I want to get to? Roughly how many miles do I need to do today to stay on track? But what are the things I really want to do? And in the cafe, I could ask people. I'd say, look, I'm here, I'm headed to this place. What should I look at on the way? And that's where the barbed wire museum, the bottle guard, the forest of bottles, those kinds of things would come up. People are saying you have to drop by here, you have to stop for an ice cream in this place. So a downside from that whole trip is I'm still trying to lose some weight because there's some great pies on Route 66. I'll tell you that for sure. So the one big insight that I think was great. And then my last insight, which is about, I mean, uh, some of the insights I'd already been thinking about, Jim, because I had decided that what I wanted to reflect on as part of my reflective practice was a question that I've been asked. People have said to me, my title is Professor of Coaching and Positive Psychology. I've been studying this for over a decade. People say to me, okay, you've studied this stuff, you teach it. What have you taken away from it? So that was the question people have asked me. And I'd never taken a fixed amount of time to actually think about that question. So I thought, well, here's the opportunity. So some of these had been, I thought, yeah, I've taken a lot from hope theory, for example. But then others emerged as I was writing to think, okay, like when it was, I had to pull off the highway because of strong winds and rain. I thought, this is where I can use optimism because I know I have the ability to be optimistic. But the second big insight for me was the last one that I share, and it's the last one I thought about, which is the importance of keeping promises to yourself. So this ties in nicely to our conversation because you started by asking me what was that thing. And I did make a promise to myself when, the 12-year-old version of me said one day. And so the importance of keeping promises to ourselves, that's the big insight. And I coach a lot of people, I work with a lot of people, and many people say, Christian, it's easier to keep promises to other people, you know.
Mm.
And if I make a promise to somebody else, I'll keep that promise, but sometimes I don't keep the promises to myself. And so that was something that I'd heard a lot and I was keen to do. And I thought it just felt so good to keep that promise to myself. And it ties into a psychological theory, which is the theory of self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is the belief that I can achieve those things that I set my mind to achieving. And I was thinking, if I keep promises to myself, or if we keep promises to ourselves, that actually boosts our self-efficacy because we would then think, if I promise myself something, I'm more likely to keep that promise. So let's say now I promise myself that I'm going to, you know, allow an hour for reading fiction every week. I'm going to go into that more confident that I'm going to do that because a promise to myself is as important as a promise to somebody else. But the flip side, Jim, is I'm more cautious about making promises to myself because
Mm.
I'm thinking, well, if I promise myself something, I need to see it through. So there's a few situations where I've said, I'm not going to promise that because I don't know if I'll be able to keep that promise, such as, I'm not going to have any pies on Route 66. I didn't make that promise because I thought I won't be able to keep that promise.
I think you can make the promise to eat the pies. I will eat a
Yeah.
pie. I'm on Route 66. So one of your big ideas from positive psychology is reflective practice.
Oh,
And
yes.
at TLC, you're going to be giving a keynote. You're going to be giving a keynote on effective reflective practice at TLC. Your new book is called, which you wrote with David Love, called Your Essential Guide to Effective Reflective Practice. So first off, why your, and then what is effective reflective practice? I have a hard time
Yes.
saying those words, but what is, when reflective practice is effective, what is it? That's what I'd like to hear.
Yeah.
But first off, why your? Why not the?
Yeah. Yeah. David Love and I have written another book together. It's called um, Advanced Coaching Practice. Um,
We actually have a podcast talking about that book.
yeah. So we wrote that book, and that book raised our question. It raised the curiosity. Remember, one of my strengths is love of learning. I became really curious about uh, how do coaches continue to learn, grow, and develop? What's the best way of coaches continuing to learn, grow, and develop? Now, of course, it's reflective practice. And as I think about it and as I've learned about this, I've come to realize that coaching is one of the best forms of reflective practice for professionals. So coaching is a managed process for reflective practice. So since David and I had written that book together, it seemed to follow that we would explore this idea of reflective practice together. Why is it called your? Is because for me, Jim, the most important thing has become supporting people to change their practice. I want to do that. That's what motivates me is to help people to bring about desired behavioral change. So we really wanted to write for the reader. I wanted to make it clear. This wasn't a book about theory. It's not another theory. It's not another exposition or something where the purpose is to present an idea. The purpose is to support people to enhance their professional practice in the service of others. So hopefully when somebody picks up this book, when it's published in November of this year, they're going to feel that it's written to them. And it has been. I really want to emphasize that. There's no hidden agendas there. We're really writing to professionals. Now, of course, educators are professionals, administrators are professionals. And for me, these are some of the most important professionals in our societies. We haven't written the book, Your Guide to Effective Reflective Practice, Your Essential Guide to Effective Reflective Practice, isn't written for coaches. It's not written for educators. It's actually written for any professional who works with other people. So that's who we were writing to. Now, effective. Why is it called effective? And, this kind of pushed back against my humility thing. But there was a reason we wanted to add the word effective reflective practice, because there are already reflective practice models out there, quite a few very good reflective practice models. And the reflective practice models, Gibbs's reflective practice model is really well known. Kolb has written a reflective practice model. But I'll highlight one. For example, I think it's Rolf and colleagues who came up with the way of reflecting on what is it you're reflecting on, so what, now what. So that's a model of reflective practice. What is it you want to think about? So what is it we're trying to change? And now what do I do? But the reason, what we've added to this is two things. One thing we've already talked about in relation to the Route 66 adventure is starting with positive intention. So this model of reflective practice doesn't start with the practice. It doesn't even start with how I want to change my practice. It goes back to what's your positive intention for wanting to change your practice. Now, in our case, Jim, in the work that we do, and I know that's what TLC this year is all about, it's about the kids, right? So if you're an educator, we don't want to start with what's the practice we want to improve unless we start with what's your positive intention. And for us as educators, the positive intention, I would hope, is something to do with making things better for our learners, whoever they are, or any of our clients or stakeholders. So the positive intention comes first in our model. And I think that's a significant thing we're adding. So one thing is we start with positive intention. And the second thing is to have a very clear focus on the outcome for the client. So again, I think this is a little bit different from other models that are out there, is it's very client focused. So once you've set your positive intention, now you move on to what's going to be different for my clients. And that helps us to avoid becoming too inward looking into what is it I need to be better at. So I might say to myself, I need to be better at, being more punctual. But in this model, the question would be, how is being more punctual going to be helpful to your clients? And if we can't make that link, you see what I mean? That's not effective, because I might have spent a lot of time being more punctual, setting my alarm clock earlier or whatever. If it doesn't have that intended outcome for the people that I'm trying to support, then it's not been effective. Third and final thing that we've highlighted as being a differentiator is we consider the well-being of the practitioner as well. So it's not, the process of reflective practice shouldn't just be a thought exercise. It's not just thinking, because, in education as well, I think one of the challenges we face is that teachers and administrators probably have very high expectations of themselves. So sometimes educators can be quite hard on themselves. I should be doing this better. I should be getting every student should be achieving the outcomes. We set ourselves very high expectations. And I know I'm speaking kind of broadly, but that's been my experience. I've coached many educators, I've coached many leaders. So that leads me to believe that we sometimes push ourselves too hard. And so if the reflective practice model that we're using doesn't highlight the importance of our own well-being, I think that's problematic. So we think this is effective because it takes into account the well-being of the practitioner, the professional, the educator, the administrator, as they engage in the process of reflective practice. So what that means is bringing self-compassion into our model. So in this model of reflective practice, it's not assumed that by the end of it, I've perfected whatever it is I was doing, and any deviation from that is going to be some kind of failure. This celebrates learning. It says we're going to, the intention was good. Maybe I haven't achieved everything I wanted. That's okay because it's a continual cycle. So our model looks like a cycle. If you were to look at the image of it, it looks like a cycle. And it's intended to be a cycle that we're constantly going through. And my hope is that beyond it being a model that helps people, so let's say an example would be a teacher wants to improve some aspect of pedagogy. This model is designed to support that. We would start with what's your positive intention for wanting to do this? What's going to be different for kids or your learners if you were successful in this process? And then we design a plan and experiment and all of that's all going on. And this, I haven't articulated it well in the book, Jim, because it's still not that clear to me and I can't articulate it well now. But what I believe is that if a person engages in continual reflective practice, it has a positive impact on their in the moment interactions as well. So if you've got a teacher who's used to this process of continually in a positive way reflecting on their practice, if something happens in the classroom in that moment, I think they'll be in a calmer state to manage that thing because they're taking this reflective view of this is all part of a learning journey.
Mm. So it could, one way to put it would be that when we develop a way of working through reflective kind of opportunities and problems, all the things you might reflect on, it's not limited to problems by any stretch, exploiting opportunities or growth or learning opportunities. When you develop that, you learn you're not at the mercy of circumstance.
Oh, yeah.
And so when circumstance arises, you go, well, I've worked through many other things before, and it gives you a kind of solid foundation. Is that the heart of the matter, do you think, or is that part of it?
That's the heart of the matter. And on Route 66, I had that, when I talked to you about that flat tire, it was a Sunday. It was there was reasons to be hopeless because
Right.
only a Harley dealer can replace the tire and all of this stuff. All the Harley dealers are closed on Sundays, and in most of the world, they're also closed on Mondays as well. So there was a lot of and my phone didn't work. There was a lot of that going on. I'd already booked my hotel. By the way, I'd booked my hotel in Oklahoma City that day. Um, and in that moment, I thought, okay, what am I going to learn from this? And what will I hope when I think back on this? What will I hope that I'd done? So I took that time to record a video
Mm-hmm.
for one of the videos. I built a connection with this person who was supporting me during that time. And I thought, how can I shift my mindset so that I enjoy my time in Tulsa? Because I had an enforced second day in Tulsa. I could have been miserable. I could have stayed in my hotel room and thought, you know what, tomorrow morning, I'll just go get this. I thought, no, I've got another day here and I love Tulsa. So because of engaging in reflective practice, exactly, I could say, well, I've overcome more challenging things than a flat tire, was something I reminded myself. But I also thought, how can I shift the way I'm thinking about this so that I can get something useful from this experience rather than uh, uh, just kind of resist it and hate every second of it and just think, well, I'm just going to wait till this is over. And that's important nowadays, I think, because when we talk about resilience, I'm worried that often we're talking about just try and pretend none of this is happening until it's over. It's
Mm.
almost like a turtle going into its shell. And the concept of mental toughness that I've talked about, or maybe even grit, maybe slightly different ways of thinking about resilience. And I hear a lot of people talking about resilience now, but for me, resilience isn't just bunkering down. We should do more than that during times of challenge. What can we do during those times to change how we're feeling about them so we can be more engaged, maybe something like that? And I wonder if listeners can kind of, associate with that. Sometimes during tough times, we just shut down and think, I'm just going to protect myself until this is over. But if we shut down, we're not engaged in trying to change what's happening around us.
Well, that's a great point. And as I think about the reflective practice
Hmm.
process, I can see it as a structure for a coaching conversation, but I could also see it as self-reflection. I could walk myself through, expand my thinking. Probably better to have a coach, a partner to go through it, but I can see that as a key thing. And it's going to be exciting to listen to the keynote at TLC, but I do have one more question about TLC. And the question is, if people want to talk with you about the Route 66 journey and not reflective practice, is that going to be okay with you? Is that all right if they come up and talk about Route 66?
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. On there's a silly, and this does take courage. So one of my third uh, uh, signature strength is humor and playfulness. I'm
Mm.
playful by nature. I enjoy playing. So you can see why I wanted to do Route 66 as well. But I recorded something kind of silly when I was in a ghost town. I was in the ghost town called Chloride.
Hmm.
It was a silver mining place. And there was literally nobody in the town when I was there. And so I recorded myself talking to myself. So there's moments of silliness there. And I've noticed when I post things on Instagram or those moments of joyfulness are the things that attract people more. So people want to know, they want to see those things. So yeah, I'd love to talk about Route 66 with anyone. And I think my hope is, and maybe this is my way of justifying it as the whole trip, but my hope is that in the process of me having fun, there's some interesting messages, and maybe those messages are easier to connect with. So yeah, I'd love people to come and talk to me about Route 66, but they can also talk to me about their reflective practice. And the Route 66 for me as well. Um, it was a great moment for me to take stock and reflect on, meaning and purpose. Again, the research would say having a clear sense of meaning and purpose is good for our well-being. So finding time in our professional lives to just take stock. So reflective practice, I think, is essential. And I always love it when people come and talk to me and show interest. So yeah, that would be wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Christian. One thing I'll just last comment is, you're a professor of positive psychology. You talk about hope and optimism and goals, and then being careful about the way in which you don't let your goals consume you, living in the moment. And I think you embodied it in this journey. I think you were living out your ideas. So it was such a pleasure to watch it take place. I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm going to say right here, I'm making a promise that if
Okay.
my body will move, I'm going to go to Nepal with you next year, and we'll do Not Route 66, but the route to Nepal. The road to Nepal will be what we'll be on next year. But
I can't
as
wait for that.
always, what a pleasure to talk with you, Christian. I love it so much. Can't wait to see you at TLC.
Thanks so much, Jim. And thanks everyone for watching this. I appreciate it. It's a good chunk of your time. So thank you so much for that. And if I get to see you at TLC, that'll be amazing.